Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hi guys, welcome to 1minutetennis.com. In today's session, I want to take a very close look at the role of the wrist in the forehand. And I want to show you the things, the positives that you should do and that you should look for using the wrist to create power and spin on the forehand. And also the big things to avoid that can be very destructive for your forehand stroke. So let's start with ready position. And most of you watching this video will have a neutral wrist in ready position, where the wrist is neither in one position nor the other. But on both forehand and backhand, we want a dorsiflex, a little movement where the hand moves back towards the arm. Sometimes it's called extension. So the wrist is moving now backwards towards the arm. It's not fully extended, it's not like it's tight and rigid, but it's not in a straight line. See the difference between neutral and a dorsiflex or extension. And I want to begin in this extended position because whether I move to the forehand or whether I move to the backhand, whether it's one-handed or two-handed, we're going to have an extended wrist in the beginning of the stroke. Where most people go wrong is right at the beginning. They start with a neutral wrist and then have to create extension in the beginning of the stroke. But it's much easier to begin with extension. It's just one less thing to think about or one less component part that can go wrong. So if we begin with an extended wrist, then we're already in the correct initiating wrist position for any of the ground strokes. So the first thing to look at is get that wrist in extension in the ready position. And we should stay in this extended position all the way through the take back until we begin the upswing to the ball. And this is where it can get confusing for a lot of people, because we now want ulnar deviation as the racket drops a little bit below the arm. It can be substantially, but the racket needs to drop below the arm. Ulnar deviation is where we break the wrist in that direction here, okay? So we have extension, flexion, radial deviation, ulnar deviation. Ulnar deviation is where we bring the pinky, the little finger, to the left, out to the side. So let's look now at what can go wrong in the stroke. First of all, I contrive to create ulnar deviation. And I have a slow mechanical stroke. Now I have a tense wrist. I have too much muscle in the wrist, so it's locked. And now there was no ulnar deviation. And now I relax and let the wrist drop. And I have a totally different stroke. Now to help you achieve this, if you know what the feel of the perfect wrist movement is, then it may be easier to achieve it in the stroke. So now, take the racket back in extension, release the racket, catch it and go forwards. And all I'm doing here is releasing and going forwards. See? Release and go forwards. And when I release from this extended position of the wrist and go forwards, the racket drops back, creating ulnar deviation. Now I'm going to do the same thing with a very tense, stiff and muscular wrist. Even with a tense wrist, there was a slight lag of the racket. But now I'm going to do the same thing with a loose and relaxed wrist, again from this extended position. Once you have the feel of this, then you know what to look for in your forehand stroke. So we have the extension and then the naturally occurring ulnar deviation, which will happen as long as you have relaxation in your wrist. And then at the end of the stroke, many players will have flexion as they finish the stroke with the wrist relaxed. This can sometimes be seen as an error. I've seen many videos where coaches are explaining that flexion is a fatal error in the forehand. It's not a fatal error. Many players, Carlos Alcaraz has flexion at the end of every one of his forehands. The key is when flexion occurs. You see, flexion is this movement here. So if I have flexion early in the stroke, then I'm going to lose all control. Then this ball is going to just go flying out of control. But if I have a relaxed wrist going from extension into ulnar deviation, allowing ulnar deviation to occur naturally, then if my wrist is still loose and the wrist is dropped back, it's natural there will be a recoil after contact into flexion. So let's look at it without the racket for a second. Extension, relaxation, ulnar deviation and flexion. Again, from this direction here, extension, relax, and naturally we have flexion here. If I try to avoid flexion, The problem is that I lock my wrist early, or it's very easy to lock the wrist early. And then we lose the relaxation that's essential to create ulnar deviation as a byproduct of extension. So extension, relax, and I have my flexed wrist. But the flexed wrist is simply a follow-through, a natural follow-through long after contact. So flexion during the contact with the ball, yes, this is a total no-no. But flexion after contact with the ball is just natural if you have a truly relaxed and loose wrist. So the key take from this is to have extension in the ready position, then we don't have to worry about it. And then if you check out at the end of the stroke, if you have this position here, then far from being a negative, this is a positive because it shows that you were relaxed when you went into ulnar deviation. Extension from the ready position, hit the ball and check out the flexion at the end. And the flexion at the end of the stroke means that I had a relaxed, loose and free wrist to create a natural ulnar deviation in the middle. So use the test to check out the feel of this and then apply the correct feeling into your forehand and you'll have a bigger, better and more controlled forehand today. If you like this idea or any other of our unique fixes on tennis, then check out our books on Amazon. Our latest book, The Missing Link of Tennis, will be out next week. The books are broken down into the science and biomechanics of the strokes and then superbly illustrated solutions such as this, helping you to reach your real potential in tennis. Or for more personalised advice, check out our online coaching. I'm helping players in over 40 countries all over the world. For more information, email me or check out the website. I hope this gives you a better understanding of the role of the wrist in the forehand because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Remember, extension is from ready position. Then we simply take the racket back doing nothing. Then relax and check out flexion at the end because that's a sign that you had the correct loose relaxed wrist as you go into the upswing with the ball. Thanks for watching and see you next time for more unique tennis lessons that really work.